You are listening to the Hemp Startup Journey. My name is Jason De Los Santos, co-founder of Spectrum Labs, a hemp extraction facility in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm sitting down with hemp entrepreneurs, scientists, and politicians willing to share their perspectives, lessons learned, and how we can make an impact on the hemp and cannabis industry for everyone. Tim, so welcome to the Hemp Startup Journey podcast. Been looking forward to speaking with you. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Excited to be here.
Let's see. So I believe that we connected on LinkedIn. LinkedIn did its voodoo magic in the background and said, you guys should connect. And I looked at your profile. You had some really good experience regarding veterinary medicine, and looks like you have your own CBD company. So I'd like to dig into that. But before we get into all of that, when you meet somebody at, I guess you were recently at one of the CBD conferences in Vegas, the MJ Biz conference. So when somebody asks you, "Hey Tim, nice to meet you. What do you do?" How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm telling them that my background is I'm a veterinarian, practice in general, emergency, and critical care medicine. And my perspective has always been that as a healthcare practitioner, we have a duty to our clients and patients to explore all therapeutic avenues. And if cannabis has health benefits, then we have a moral and ethical duty to determine how it can improve the lives of our patients. And so I saw how well it worked for people, and I really wanted to be able to find out how we can apply those benefits to animals. And so in 2015, I started my company VETCBD, and the goal of that company has always been to be able to integrate cannabinoid therapeutics into veterinary medicine for the benefit of our patients.
So let's dive right in. You said a lot of things I'd like to dig into a little bit more. So typically, medicine in the United States is pretty conservative, right? For good reasons. But what was the catalyst? What made you say, there's something here? Because most of the physicians that I speak with and just folks in the medical world, they're still very hesitant. There are a few more folks that are kind of coming onto the concept of cannabis and hemp. But what was it for you? How did you say, there's probably a benefit here?
Well, it goes a little bit deeper than just cannabis, because when we think about why cannabis works, we have to really look at the endocannabinoid system. And so the endocannabinoid system is something that's present in humans, it's present in animals, and you can think of it similar to how you might think of the endocrine system. And the endocrine system is the system that is responsible for creating and regulating your hormones. The endocannabinoid system is something that is intertwined with all other systems in our body. So whether it's the nervous system, the circulatory system, bone, skin, muscle, digestive tract, the endocannabinoid system plays a role in all those systems. And so when we look at that, we have to realize that there's an entire avenue of medicine here that hasn't really been studied. It was actually only discovered in the early 90s. So we really need to be able to dive into this and see exactly what this is and how we can utilize this to our patients' benefits. And so that's where cannabis comes in, because it interacts with this endocannabinoid system. And through this interaction with the endocannabinoid system, we're able to achieve all kinds of clinical benefits for patients.
Okay. And was there, for you personally, was that just reading an article and realizing that there's some benefits here, or was it talking to somebody or maybe seeing one of your patients? Just curious on a personal level, how you got to that point.
Yeah, one of the big things that was a driving force for me was that when I was in practice, the reality is that a lot of the medications that we commonly prescribe can have some serious potential side effects. So, for example, there are some commonly prescribed pain medications that some of the potential side effects include things like liver damage, kidney damage, or GI ulceration. And when you're constantly prescribing those medications and you're warning owners about those potential side effects, a lot of times owners don't feel comfortable about that. We've all heard stories about where medicine was used to treat something that was a side effect of another medication that was used to treat a condition. Mm-hmm. And I saw that, and I didn't want that for my patients. And so I looked at different alternatives that could be available that also worked, because, there are a lot of, proposed alternative solutions out there that haven't shown efficacy, that haven't been shown to work. So for me, I wanted something that was able to work effectively, but also be safe for patients. And, I saw this in, one of my older dogs when she was still around, was that she was sensitive to certain medications, and, she had debilitating arthritis, but, I was hesitant to put her on some of these medications that could potentially cause things like organ damage or GI ulceration. And so that's when I really looked into cannabis and took a deep dive on it and saw that, when it's dosed and formulated properly, it can be remarkably safe.
Mm-hmm. Roughly what year was that when you started to experiment and look into it?
That was late 2014.
2014. And so when you decided to start implementing it in your practice, did you get any kind of pushback from whether it's your patients or maybe coworkers, or was everybody pretty receptive of that concept?
Well, once I started the company, I actually retired from practice.
Okay.
So I haven't incorporated into practice. Mm-hmm. The laws are actually fairly strict around that. Veterinarians actually can't incorporate cannabinoid therapeutics into their practice yet. That's unfortunate because there's a lot of patients that could benefit from that. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of situations where owners need to be able to receive that information directly from veterinarians, but they're not getting that information. Now, having said that, when I first started the company, we did receive a lot of pushback. And the reason why is because veterinarians and, same thing with physicians, they really didn't learn anything about the endocannabinoid system or cannabis as a therapeutic. What they learned about was, the potential toxicity of cannabis. And so with that kind of mindset, there was pushback from the veterinary community because they didn't understand what cannabinoid therapeutics were or what they were capable of and how they could be used to interact with the endocannabinoid system to produce therapeutic benefits. Now, fast forward to today, that's changed drastically. We're talking to veterinarians every single day that can't get enough information, primarily because clients are coming up to them and saying, hey, I've been using this on my dog or cat and it's been working amazing. The seizures have drastically gone down, or their mobility has increased, or it's been able to help control their GI symptoms by decreasing their nausea or helping with their appetite. And so we're seeing veterinarians all the time want to learn more about this and learn how they are able to utilize this to the benefit of their patients.
Got it. So that's good information, just that vets cannot incorporate this into their practice. So is there, when the vets are reaching out to you and your company, like practically, what kind of advice are you providing to them? Or I guess, how could they incorporate it? Is this something where they just say, oh, well, to their patients, well, you can just try it on your own, or do they sell it in their own practices? How does that practically work with hemp and cannabis?
Well, the biggest thing is for them to be able to provide information to their clients. So, for the things like clinical applications, because there's a lot of claims out there that cannabis can be used for anything and everything. And that's inaccurate. Cannabis can be used for a lot of things, which is one of the most remarkable things about it, is that, it's not specifically used for just one ailment, like say seizures. But, we've seen it be used for different things, from whether it's pain or anxiety, inflammatory conditions, or nausea or seizures. It can be used for a wide variety of ailments. Now, it's important for the veterinarian and the physician to be able to understand that, so that they can accurately relay that information to their clients. And then they can also, tell them about the importance of things like testing to make sure that the potency that's on the label is actually what's reflected in the product itself, and to make sure that the product's also tested for other things like pesticides, solvents, heavy metals, microbials, and mycotoxins. So providing that information is one of the most beneficial things that a doctor can do for their clients.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that testing? For as much information as it has been coming out last year, 2019, about testing, I feel like that's still, we're still not seeing enough in the industry about understanding what we should be testing for, or as a consumer, what we should be looking for. So the specific directive that you're educating the veterinarians on is what, like just to look on the bottle, or is it to ask the retailer for COAs, or how can they practically educate their patients and the owners of their patients about testing and verifying that something is going to be safe?
Yeah, so there's really two sides to it. One is the regulated cannabis market, and then the other is the hemp market. The hemp market is more or less unregulated. In terms of the regulated cannabis market, so for example, we have two lines. We have VETCBD, which is our cannabis line, and then we have Dr. Shu's Pet Care, which is our hemp line. Now, for VETCBD, it's in the regulated California cannabis market. So what that means is that from start to finish, it has to go through, a licensed cultivator to a licensed manufacturer, through a licensed distributor to a licensed retailer. And along the way, what we do is we triple test the product. So the source extract material will do what's called a full phase 3 panel testing. And what that includes potency. So we know what kind of cannabinoids in there and how much cannabinoid is in there. And then we also test it for pesticides, residual solvents, heavy metals, mycotoxins, and microbials. And then along the way of production, we also test it again for potency to make sure that we're exactly on point with whatever's going to be on the label. And then before it hits the retailers, it actually has to get tested again for phase 3 compliance. And so again, what we'll do is test it for potency, pesticides, solvents, microbials, mycotoxins, and heavy metals. That way the consumer knows that they're getting safe, clean, consistent material every single time they purchase the product. Now, on the hemp side of things, there is no requirement for testing. So what that means is that a hemp product that someone buys online or picks up off the shelf at their local grocery store is not under any sort of requirement to do any sort of testing. And so that's where some people have seen issues is that, there was a 2017 UPenn study that looked at different CBD products that were out in the market, and they found that up to 70% of them were actually mislabeled. So what that means is if, the label said 100 milligrams, then 100 milligrams wasn't necessarily what you got in the product. You may have gotten 50 milligrams, or you may have gotten 75 milligrams, or in some cases you got 0 milligrams. They actually did find some products actually didn't contain any cannabinoids. So it's really important that when you're looking at the hemp side of things, it's a company that actually does undergo routine testing for every single batch that they produce. So that way, that you're getting clean, safe, consistent material.
Curious about your experience. So when we speak with the end user, the customer, there's not much information. There's not much education about what they should be looking for. Most of the time they just hear from their mom or friend or sister or somebody, and they say like, oh, you got to try CBD. But do you see that the same? Do you have that experience as well, where a lot of folks just don't have that experience other than just, oh, I need to be trying CBD? Do any folks come to you knowing that they should be looking for these lab results to make sure that the product contains what it says it does and that it's safe?
Yeah, everything in this industry is still very early stage. So the consumers are starting to figure out, what they should be looking for. And the reality is that the market moves faster than regulations and laws and research and education. So it's really up to the consumer to be able to get up to speed, on what they should be looking for and what they're using it for. Fortunately, there are a lot of companies and a lot of brands out there that are able to produce accurate, reliable information that's, backed by science, backed by medicine, to be able to provide this information to help guide these clients and patients.
I'm not sure how it is with the cannabis side, but with hemp, there's some USDA regulation that has been kind of causing an uproar lately. And one of those pieces is that all hemp is supposed to be tested by a DEA approved lab. Do you know, are you aware of that proposed legislation?
Yeah, I mean, the industry moves so fast that, basically the laws change from month to month.
And just curious if you think does that address some of these issues about testing, or could that cause a potential harm in that just funneling all of these, let's say, cultivators and extractors down to just a handful of labs and not getting lab results quickly enough to be able to satisfy the market?
Well, I mean, there's a couple issues that can be there. One is that sometimes you will get results different from lab to lab. For example, you may get the same sample and you may send it out to 5 different labs and get 5 different results. And when we're looking at 0.3% THC, we have to understand that that's a completely arbitrary limit. There's no scientific backing on why 0.3% is 0.3%. It's completely arbitrarily chosen. So, that's an area that's a moving target, and I'm sure we'll see that develop more over the next couple of years.
Because I guess different parts of the world have different limits. I guess some parts in Europe have was like 1, and some parts have a little bit less. Just wondering if anyone has done any kind of research or study, or I don't know if do you have any input on what you think that limit should be for THC on a hemp product?
It's like you said, it's tricky. Some parts of the world, it's less than 0.2%. Sometimes it's less than 1%. And these numbers are chosen completely arbitrarily. And when you're looking at it, well, those are the numbers according to the dry weight of the flower. But if you're actually producing something that is 0.3% THC, and then only, maybe 1 to 3% CBD, when you extract that, the concentrate that you make is going to be far higher than 0.3% THC. And that's one of the elephants in the room that no one's really talking about, is what happens when you extract that material and it becomes concentrated, and that THC concentration is greater than 0.3%.
Yeah. I feel like that's there, and nobody is officially talking about it. Probably just because there's so many other things that people are worried about. But let's see, just to switch gears for a second. One of the things that we briefly talked about before was THC and pets. And you mentioned that one of the things that you see often is that there's this demonization with THC and pets, and that some folks believe that, oh, well, no, pets shouldn't touch THC whatsoever. Can you talk a little bit about that and help to educate on how we should consider THC with pets?
Yeah, there's this misconception out there amongst health professionals, pet owners, that THC is something that is terribly toxic, it's poisonous, and that's not the case. That's not true. THC absolutely has medicinal benefits. We know that it can be very beneficial for things like pain relief, for nausea relief, for appetite stimulation. It can be used for anti-inflammatory purposes, and it also has anti-cancer properties. The key that's really, really important is to be able to make sure that you dose it and formulate it properly so that animals are not getting the side effects from THC. Some species of animals, like dogs, for example, are a little bit more sensitive to THC because they have a higher concentration of CB1 receptors in a part of their brain called the cerebellum. Now, that's not to say that they can't utilize THC. They absolutely can. It just needs to be dosed and formulated properly for them so that they're able to benefit from it. Since 2015, we've utilized THC in all our products, and we've helped tens of thousands of patients, whether they're dogs, cats, horses, birds, rabbits, guinea pigs. We've had pigs, ferrets, rats, you name it. They've all been able to find benefit from CBD and THC, but the most important thing is that it's dosed and formulated properly.
Gotcha. How do you educate somebody about the correct dosage? Is it a weight issue or a breed or a type of animal? How do you?
Right. It's primarily by weight. For a lot of our pets, they can vary quite a bit in weight. You can have a 10-pound Chihuahua. You can have a 150-pound Husky, and so their dosage is not going to be the same. Now, having said that, one of the most remarkable things that we see with cannabinoid therapeutics is that, it doesn't strictly go by weight. For example, we can have some pets that are the exact same weight, say, for example, 2 labs that are 70 pounds. And, they may be using it for the exact same condition, but one may use much less than the other. And one of them may be able to use it 1 time a day, where another may be needing it twice a day. So each individual patient is going to vary in terms of the dose that they need. So that's why what we always educate people on is to be able to start low and go slow. So what that means is start at a lower level and gradually titrate it upwards to find the most efficient, most optimal dose for that patient and for that patient's condition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. And let's see, for these patients, how long does it seem to take for, I guess, the pet owner to respond and say, like, oh, it looks like it's working? Is it something where you've noticed anecdotally, maybe is it a couple of days, a week, or two? Just curious in your world, how quickly it seems to take effect.
Well, when you have the right dose, it'll take effect within a couple of hours. Now, finding the right dose may sometimes take a couple of days, but once a owner finds the right dose for that pet and for their condition, you should see the effects and the benefits of it within a couple of hours after ingestion.
Gotcha. Okay. And are there things that somebody should be looking out for that could be an indicator that something is not working, or maybe that it's doing more harm than good? Is there such a thing?
Well, what we're looking for, because animals can't talk to us and they can't tell us how they're feeling, is we're looking for a resolution of clinical signs. So, for example, one of the most common uses for cannabinoid therapeutics in pets is for things like pain, especially when it comes to arthritis and lameness. And so what we evaluate is resolution of those clinical signs. So, for example, a pet that had difficulty getting up in the morning, or that was only able to go for a walk for a block, are they able to, have increased mobility? Are they now able to go for a walk for 2 or 3 blocks? Grade their lameness. How severe is their lameness, and are we seeing it improve? Certainly, some conditions are much easier to gauge than others. For example, with seizures, we have a lot of people that actually track their pets' seizures. So if their pet's having a seizure every single day, and they see that after starting cannabis, it's being reduced to maybe once a week or once a month, then they're able to see improvement. So gauging clinical signs and assessing those signs are the most important things when it comes to pets.
Okay. One of my favorite stories, and it just never gets old, is talking to a pet owner, and the person relaying a story of how their pet was in whatever, pain or had some physical issues, and they started using hemp products, and over a span of a few days, then all of a sudden their pet is just running around like crazy and seemed like it's just found a new life. And that always puts a smile on my face. Like I love hearing those stories, and I'm sure that you've had your company for a few years. Curious if you have any stories to share about some of these improvements that you've seen in some of your clients and patients, and whether that's with cannabis or with hemp products.
Yeah. So, you really hit the nail on the head, is that a lot of times we will actually see some pretty remarkable turnarounds. The most drastic ones that we've seen are ones where the patient was suffering from epilepsy and they were having severe grand mal seizures on a daily basis, despite being on anti-seizure medications. And so the owners were at the point where they were actually considering euthanasia because the quality of life was so poor. They didn't want to see their pets suffering through so many seizures on a daily basis. And so they actually turned to cannabis as a last resort. They said, why not try cannabis? That's it's better than dying, right? And so they actually try cannabis as a last resort. And a lot of times these cases, it drastically reduced their seizures. Some of these people that we talked to, they were having full blown grand mal seizures on a daily basis. And it went down to something like, a lot of times once a month, or sometimes once every couple of months. And that's a huge change in the quality of life. And quite literally, these pets' lives were saved through cannabis. Some of the other cases that we see are a lot of elderly patients where, the owners were so concerned about their ability to get around and their mobility that they were, again, considering euthanasia because the quality of life was no longer there. And that's when they turned to cannabis and saw remarkable turnarounds in terms of the patient's pain control and their ability to get around and, move comfortably. And so we've seen cannabis extend the life of a lot of these patients and improve the quality of life of a lot of these patients.
That's amazing. Love hearing those stories. I just saw a meme a couple of days ago, a friend shared, and it said something to the effect of, I have about 4 or 5 people that I know, and about 500 to 600 pets on the internet that I've never met. And I think we have this just love and appreciation for animals. And I think to be able to give something like this to them and just get some vitality back in their lives is pretty incredible. And just curious if you care to share, just wondering if you feel that impact that you're offering to these pets. Just wondering if just curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's one of the most amazing things is because the way we view it as a company, we're not here to sell people product. What we're here to do is improve their pets' lives and help their pets live their best lives. And to be able to see that on a daily basis is just nothing short of remarkable. And, this is something that, years ago, a lot of people, frowned on it, saying, oh, it's just cannabis or it's just snake oil. But, fast forward to today, and we're seeing so many pets benefit from it. And it's just something that's absolutely amazing to see.
Yeah, awesome. Let's see. So switch gears a little bit. With you've been in the industry for a few years now. We're recording this at the beginning of 2020, and just curious where you see we can start off with the hemp industry. Where you see the hemp industry going in the next 12 months? Like, what are some of the big things that you see possibly coming down the line?
Yeah, it's interesting because things change so fast. A month in the cannabis or the hemp industry is really like 2 or 3 years in any other industry. And it's such a unique industry because it's a CPG industry, but it moves at a tech industry pace. So for example, CBD was all the rage in 2019, but now in 2020, everyone's looking for the next big thing. And so people are selling CBG, CBN, CBC, and now CBT is the new kid on the block. And it's really interesting because the market moves faster than the research and the laws. But to answer your question, some of the things that we'll see for sure are increased accessibility as the laws change. And we'll also see decreased pricing due to commoditization. But we'll also see front runners of the industry avoid commoditization by innovating. Any company that looks to be in this industry long term really needs to evaluate how they're allocating capital towards R&D, because the reality is that this industry is still in its startup phase. We're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding the full potential of cannabinoid therapeutics. And CBD is all the rage now, but 5 years from now, it could be one of the other 150 cannabinoids or a compound that has yet to be discovered. In fact, it was just recently announced the other week that researchers had discovered 2 new cannabinoids, THCP and CBDP. Eventually they'll need to start changing the names because they're going to start running out of letters to use.
What now? So looking into that, and I've started to just refer to the product as just hemp instead of CBD. I think when I came into the industry, that was the term, right? CBD, but there's obviously so much more. Just curious, what are the things in the industry that people are not talking enough about? Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, I think, there needs to be more research. Like I said, the market moves faster than the research, the education, and the laws. We're talking about the cannabis plant. And, when I say cannabis, I refer to it as, marijuana and hemp. They're all cannabis plants. The fact is that, we're talking about a pharmacological treasure trove. This is a plant that has over 500 different pharmacological active components to it. The cannabinoids, in terms of, years ago, we thought that there were 80 cannabinoids, and then that number increased to about 120 cannabinoids, and now it's at 150 cannabinoids. And we're talking about, not just cannabinoids, but things like terpenes and flavonoids. And, this is an amazing plant that has so much capability, so much potential, but, the research is really lagging behind other aspects like the market. Like I mentioned, people are starting to sell CBT isolate. Well, what is CBT isolate for? No one knows. There's no research behind it, but the product is available. So really what we need to do is focus on the research and find out how these products are able to potentially benefit consumers.
And I don't even know if you can answer this question, but at which point does research satisfy the question of, well, there's not enough research, and which I agree with, but is it something where somebody has to create a giant clinical study, double-blind test, and all that kind of stuff, or is it a study published and major news organizations putting it out to the world where it catches virality? I've just been thinking about that question lately, and I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, you can always make the argument that there's not enough research, or there's not enough clinical studies behind something, because the truth is that we could always have more. Now, does there need to be more? Absolutely. Now, are there clinical studies out there? They absolutely are. So to say that there's not any clinical studies or there's not any research or evidence out there is not true. There are a lot of clinical studies out there that have been performed, whether it's for things like arthritis or epilepsy or anxiety. We do have evidence out there that cannabinoid therapeutics can be very beneficial for a number of conditions. But to answer your question, we do need more large-scale, double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized clinical trials that are performed by large, reputable universities.
Mm-hmm. I know that the University of South Carolina has been doing a lot of research for, I think, 15, 20 years or so. Some pretty remarkable studies that they found. I was at a conference last year, and the director of research, Dr. Nagarkati, had some really amazing things talking about cancer. IBS was one that I didn't realize, that hemp, and I think they also studied cannabis or marijuana as well, that it helps. But it seemed like there was not enough attention to some remarkable findings that they had published out to the world. Like they weren't holding it close to them, to their hearts. They were just saying, "Hey, world, here it is," but just not enough attention for whatever reason. After
yeah, there's a lot of really interesting potential uses for cannabis. You mentioned IBS. Anything that involves excessive inflammation or irritation, there's potential for it because the endocannabinoid system is involved in regulation. It's involved in homeostasis, meaning when it comes to inflammation, it prevents there from being too much or too little inflammation. And certainly in, situations like IBS or IBD, there's excessive amounts of inflammation. Even things like allergies where there's excessive amounts of inflammation, there's potential for cannabinoid therapeutics to benefit allergy patients. Certainly in a lot of the dogs that we've worked with over the years, we have seen patients benefit from use of cannabinoids to help control their allergies. So for dogs, one of the common things that they get is what's called atopy, and that's skin allergies. And we've seen a number of patients actually really benefit from cannabinoid therapeutics in decreasing the inflammation that they're going through.
Really interesting. So allergies are a function of inflammation in the body. Is that right?
Right. So basically what happens is, you get something benign that shouldn't normally cause anything like, pollen or danders, and the body overreacts thinking it's some sort of invader. And so it triggers the immune system to start attacking things that normally it shouldn't, even be concerned with. And that's where you get allergies.
Huh, really interesting. Is there, we might be going off track, but just curious, because a lot of folks that I know, they seem to over time develop an allergy to something that they used to consume or use all the time. Like my wife just got some hives the other day for something that she had been using forever. Is there a reason why the body, in a way, seems to turn on itself?
It's strange, and it's something that we're still understanding. The body is an incredibly complex system, and there's so many different pieces involved that we're still learning about so many different things. The endocannabinoid system was only discovered 30 years ago, right. And it's such an intricate part of our physiology that we're constantly learning more and more about things like the immune system and how allergies play a role in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see, Tim, switching gears a little bit before we have to go. I want to make sure to respect your time here. But do you have any, step back for a second. So throughout these conversations, I like to make sure to humanize the person that I'm putting on the podcast. We're more than just a group of people, right? We're individuals and we have skill sets and great qualities. And I think we also have learned a few things along the way. I certainly have myself. Just curious if there are any lessons learned that you'd like to share about your time in the industry, anything, whether it's a mistake that you've been through or something that you had a misconception about with cannabis in general, or whether it's a business lesson. I'm curious if there's anything there that you'd like to share.
Sure. This is a completely new industry that's being developed. And while cannabis is not something that's new, it's been cultivated around the world for thousands and thousands of years, but the world has never seen cannabis and hemp scale to the scope and depth that we're at today. And so there's pitfalls left and right, and you have to really be able to roll with the punches. Like we talked about earlier, laws change pretty much on a monthly basis. What was, one case next month is completely different. And so you really have to be adaptable, and you have to be purpose driven, or you're going to get swallowed up by the challenges that a young, rapidly developing industry faces.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I often see, and every once in a while I'm susceptible to this, is that there's so many possibilities and opportunities and new things coming out, and such and such company is doing this, and the natural tendency to say like, oh well, I want to try that, like I want to do that, or here's this company, I want to be able to compete with them, and there are probably way too many avenues to be successful in all of them, as opposed to finding a niche or a focus and going after that and making the best possible whatever product or company that you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to be able to have a long-term vision of what you want to do, and what you want to be able to provide your customers. If you're just chasing the next fad, the next big thing, then you're really looking at playing the finite game. It's very much short-term goals. But what you want to do is you want to play the infinite game. You want to have long-term vision and long-term goals, and really look at how you want to be able to improve your customers' quality of life.
Mm-hmm. With your companies, is there anything that you guys that you're willing to talk about that you're coming out with soon, or anything that you want people to know about your companies?
Yeah, some of the different things is that we're looking at specific formulations that are able to target specific conditions for specific species. Certainly a lot of new cannabinoids are available on the market now. And what we're doing is looking at the different potential uses of those cannabinoids and the method of delivery, so whether that's an oral application or if it's a topical application. But, for us, really our approach to the industry is a four-pronged approach. The CPG aspect of it, which is producing and providing the product for the consumer to be able to improve their lives. But also we focus heavily on research. We want to be able to really drive forward the understanding and the value of cannabinoid therapeutics and how we can apply it to medicine. We also focus on education, because education is one of the most crucial important aspects of this industry, and that there's not enough education out there. So, we talk to veterinarians all the time, and, because veterinarians didn't learn about this in school, they, are not up to speed on what the endocannabinoid system is or the clinical application of cannabinoid therapeutics. And same thing on the human side, same thing with the physicians. They didn't learn about cannabinoid therapeutics or the endocannabinoid system in school. A lot of schools still aren't teaching about it, or if they do, it's very, very brief. And you can imagine if you went to your doctor and you said, hey, what's this that I hear about the endocrine system? What are hormones? What does insulin do? What's testosterone? What's estrogen? And your doctor said, I don't know anything about it. I didn't learn anything about it in school. You would think that that's crazy, right? But that's where we're at right now. When we're going to our doctor and saying, what's this I hear about anandamide or 2-AG, or could there be misformed, endocannabinoid receptors and things like that. And, we're at the point where our doctors say, I don't know. I didn't learn about that in school. And so for us, education is a real crucial component about this, all the way from, the producers and the industry to the doctors and to the clients and the patients. So that's something that we focus heavily on. And then also legislative reform, because this is an industry that's coming out of the prohibition era. And, we're still stuck in a lot of ways behind the laws of, old. A lot of veterinarians don't feel comfortable providing education or information to their clients. And we want to change that, because the best information should be coming from the doctors. And we want doctors to be able to feel comfortable discussing those issues and providing that information to their clients.
Okay. And I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I just find it interesting that what you're saying is that there could potentially be a slightly different, maybe strain or hemp or cannabis profile for, let's say, a bird versus a dog. Is that kind of what you're saying about meeting specific conditions by species?
Right, because we know that, all vertebrate animals have endocannabinoid systems, but, that's not to say that they're all exactly the same. So for example, one of the big examples that's used quite frequently, like I mentioned before, is that dogs have a high concentration of CB1 receptors in their cerebellum. And we even see that there are differences potentially from patient to patient. For example, like in humans, you may give the same product for one person to try, and they get a certain response, and then the other person that tries it gets a completely different response. One of the potential reasons for that is because there are differences in an individual's endocannabinoid system. So the way that their genetics encode things, for example, like their cannabinoid receptors, could be completely different from person A to person B. And there have been some studies that have shown that to be the case. And so we know that even within the same species, that there could be differences between one patient and another patient. And we definitely see that there is evidence that shows that from one species to another species, the endocannabinoid system can be slightly different.
Wow, super interesting. I wonder when we'll get to a point where somebody will go into wherever, some retail store or shop online, and know exactly the type of product that they need to get. Will that take, like genetics or some sort of additional studies with a combination of terpenes and flavonoids and cannabinoids? I think that would be pretty interesting, but it seems like we're really far away from that.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I think that's where it really gets down to personalized medicine, is being able to understand the individual and how their genetics influence, what specific formulation or what specific ratio or dose that they need. Say for example, one patient could need something that's like a 10 part CBD to 1 part THC to 1 part CBG to 1 part CBC formulation for their epilepsy. Because of the way that their endocannabinoid system is coded. And then another person who has the same condition may need a different formulation because of the way that their endocannabinoid system is encoded. So, we can get down to personalized genetics and, find specific formulations and dosages for individuals. Now, how long that takes, whether that's 5 years from now, whether that's 10, 20 years from now, that's all up in the air. But, I think that's certainly the right direction.
Yeah, I think that'll be pretty amazing, because I think right now there's this failed expectations when it doesn't work for somebody, especially because it's such a trending topic right now that somebody hears that, oh my gosh, my brother just had a life-changing benefit from this product, and I tried it, it didn't do anything for me. And so when somebody gets to that point, they're like, oh, well, this is terrible. But that might not be the case. Maybe they haven't been guided exactly on trying different types or maybe the right dosage. So like you're saying, we could be really far off from that personalized. John Smith needs these specific combinations of cannabinoids.
Right. And, we see that in terms of our understanding of the endocannabinoid system. When the endocannabinoid system was first discovered in the early 90s, we talked about, CB1 and the CB2 receptors as the endocannabinoid receptors. And now there's talk of a potential CB3, which is a receptor called GPR55. Some people think that this may be the CB3 receptor. And then, in terms of endocannabinoids, everyone talks about anandamide and 2-AG because those were the first two endocannabinoids that were discovered that our own bodies produce. But in terms of, the number of endocannabinoids that have been discovered thus far, we're up to something like 5 or 6 different endocannabinoids that we know that our own bodies produce. So our understanding of the endocannabinoid system at this stage is still very elementary, and there's a lot to be discovered over the next decade or two and beyond that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that helps to answer a little bit of my question that we were talking about earlier. So as far as more research and just continuing to drill down and understanding more about these CB3 receptors possibly, or just a lot more information that we need to understand in order to be able to get more personalized. So let's see, Tim, I have a page full of notes here. I learned quite a bit. Thank you for sharing. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how would you prefer that they go about that?
Well, they can visit our website if they want to learn more about what we do at VETCBD.com or drshuspetcare.com. If they want to get in touch with me personally, they can send an email to info@vetcbd.com. Happy to talk to anybody and everybody. I love what we do, love, sharing information and swapping ideas. This is such an exciting industry, and it's something that, I'm very fortunate to be a part of. And so, anyone that wants to get in touch with me and talk to me, I'm more than happy to do so.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing your insights with the world. And hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Hey guys, and before you go, this is Jason from Spectrum Labs. Please be sure to visit us on the web at thespectrumlabs.com for any show notes and links discussed in the podcast. Also, remember to click the subscribe button wherever you may be listening from so you get notified when our next episode comes out. And tune in next show and have a fantastic day.